3 men attacked a woman in a restaurant. 15 seconds later, they learned she was a Navy SEAL. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our story. As Emily Carter stood over the men she had just disarmed, the restaurant remained eerily silent. Her eyes, cold and unblinking, scanned the room, assessing the reactions of the onlookers. Some were still in shock, their mouths agape, while others had their phones out, already recording the spectacle. The 3 men who had tried to humiliate her now lay sprawled across the floor, their faces flushed with embarrassment and pain. Jake, the one who had started it all, was struggling to sit up, wincing as he moved. Emily's gaze shifted briefly to the door, considering her next steps. She had made her point. But there was something deeper at play here, something she couldn't let slide. The silence in the room felt heavy, like a looming storm, and the whispers began to grow louder as people processed what had just unfolded. "Who the hell is she?" someone muttered from across the room, their voice full of disbelief. Another voice chimed in, "She's got to be military, no way she moves like that unless she's been trained." Emily's stance remained relaxed, though her mind was alert, constantly calculating her next move. She felt eyes on her from every direction, a mix of awe and confusion. The feeling was all too familiar. It wasn't the first time she had been underestimated, far from it. The SEALs had taught her how to read a room, how to sense when people were trying to figure her out. She could almost hear their thoughts racing. Who is this woman? What's her story? She let the tension build just a little longer, then slowly turned her attention back to the group of men still recovering from her swift takedown. Jake was trying to gather himself, his voice low but edged with frustration. "You think you're tough, huh?" he spat, his words heavy with humiliation. Emily crouched down to meet his gaze, her face inches from his, her voice soft but lethal. "No, I don't think I'm tough. I know I am." With that, she stood up, moving gracefully as if she hadn't just incapacitated 3 men in seconds. The room was still buzzing, but now the chatter was different. There was no more mocking, no more taunting. The crowd was beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. Emily wasn't just a woman sitting alone at a table anymore, she was a force, someone to be respected. She turned and walked toward the door, her boots clicking softly on the floor as she made her way to the exit. The sound of her steps was the only thing breaking the quiet. But before she reached the door, she paused. "Next time, don't judge a book by its cover," she said, her voice calm but full of authority. The 3 men on the floor didn't reply. They couldn't. They were still stunned by what had just happened. Emily stepped out into the cool night air, her breath steady, her heart racing with the adrenaline that had yet to fade. She had done what she needed to do. But this wasn't just about self-defense, it was a lesson. A reminder that underestimating someone, especially someone who had seen as much as she had, could lead to painful consequences. As she walked across the parking lot toward her car, Emily's mind wandered back to her training days with the SEALs. She remembered the grueling hours, the physical tests, the moments of doubt when she wondered if she would make it through. But she had. And now, no one would ever question her again, not to her face, at least. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen. It was a text from her commanding officer, "We have a new mission. Get ready." Emily smiled to herself as she slid into her car, her body still buzzing with the aftereffects of the confrontation. This was the life she had chosen. A life where every day was a test, a challenge. And she had passed yet another one. The mission ahead would be tough, she knew that much. But it didn't matter. Whatever came next, Emily Carter would be ready. As Emily Carter drove through the empty streets, the adrenaline From the restaurant incident began to wear off, replaced by a familiar sense of calm. She had been through countless situations like that before, but the reaction of the men back at the restaurant was different. There was no more bravado, no more mocking. They had learned a valuable lesson. It was a feeling of satisfaction she knew all too well. She glanced at the rearview mirror, catching her reflection, the calm expression on her face a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. She was still in the mindset of a soldier, always prepared, always aware, even in moments of unexpected conflict. The phone buzzed again, pulling her back into focus. It was a call this time. She picked it up, recognizing the number immediately. It was Lieutenant Harris. "Carter," Harris greeted, his voice direct, no time for pleasantries. "We've got a situation. Meet me at the base, ASAP." Emily's grip tightened on the steering wheel as she turned the car toward the military base. Her mind immediately began running through the possibilities. She had just wrapped up one situation, and now another mission was on the horizon. She didn't need to ask what it was. Whatever it was, it would require her full attention. When she arrived at the base, the tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't unusual, but something about tonight felt different. Harris was waiting for her near the entrance, his arms crossed, scanning the parking lot. "Carter," he said as she approached. "We've got intel on an enemy unit making moves in the region. This could escalate fast." Emily nodded, her expression still calm, but her mind was already processing the information. She had been in countless missions where the stakes were high, but this felt personal. She could sense it. "What's the plan?" she asked. Harris handed her a tablet, showing the live feed of a remote location. "We've tracked their movements here, deep in the hills. They're setting up an operation, and we need to take it down before they get too entrenched. You'll lead a team in, hit hard and fast, and neutralize the threat. No room for mistakes." Emily studied the map on the tablet, her fingers tracing the lines of the terrain. The hills were rugged, the kind of place where enemy units often hid out, knowing the landscape would work in their favor. But Emily wasn't worried. She had trained for this, lived for this. "Understood," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I'll take point." Harris gave a small nod of approval, though his eyes were filled with the seriousness of the task at hand. "Good. You'll be airborne in 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Emily didn't need to be told twice. She walked toward the hangar where the choppers were waiting, her mind already shifting into mission mode. This was the kind of work she thrived on. The preparations were quick. The team was already assembling, each member ready to follow her lead. Emily briefed them in a few short sentences, explaining the target area, their objectives, and what to expect. Her voice was calm, direct, the way it always was before a mission. No frills, no extra words. They knew what was at stake. "We move fast. We hit hard. No hesitation," she said, looking each member in the eye. The team nodded in agreement. They were ready. As they boarded the helicopter, Emily felt the familiar weight of her gears settling into place. The thrum of the chopper's engines filled the air, drowning out all other sounds. It was just her team, and the mission ahead. The city lights disappeared beneath them as the helicopter climbed higher into the sky, heading toward the hills. Emily's mind focused on the task at hand, but part of her couldn't help but think about the events earlier that day. The men at the restaurant, their mocking words, their disbelief when she took control, it was a reminder of why she had chosen this life. To prove them all wrong. But now, there was no time for reflection. They were closing in on the target area. The plan was simple. Infiltrate, eliminate the threat, and extract. There would be no second chances. Emily's heart rate remained steady, her focus absolute as the helicopter hovered over the landing zone. She gave a quick signal to the pilot, who began the descent. As they touched down, Emily was the first to leap out, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. The team followed swiftly, and they moved quickly, spreading out to cover all angles. The night was dark, the hills silent except for the sound of their footsteps. The team moved in formation, keeping low, the mission playing out like an old instinct, silent, swift, and deadly. They reached the enemy position in less than an hour. Emily signaled for the team to stop, her hand raised in the universal gesture for, wait. She scanned the area through her night vision goggles, her eyes narrowing as she saw movement ahead. They were in position. This was it. On my mark, she whispered. The team tensed, their weapons ready. Emily steadied her breath, focusing on the task at hand. Go, she whispered. The team advanced, their movements quick and precise, as they closed in on the enemy position. Emily led the charge, her eyes scanning for threats, her body reacting before her mind even caught up. She could feel the weight of the mission on her shoulders, but it didn't faze her. This was what she was made for. The enemy didn't know what hit them. Within moments, they were on the ground, incapacitated. Emily stood over the last of the enemy soldiers, her gun aimed, ready for the final move. The operation was a success, the enemy wiped out. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this mission than what met the eye. As the team regrouped and prepared for extraction, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was only just the beginning. As Emily and her team made their way back to the extraction point, the adrenaline began to ebb away, replaced by the familiar calm that followed a successful operation. The mission was complete, but something about it didn't sit right with her. There was an unsettling feeling lingering in the back of her mind. Something about the enemy position felt too easy, too clean, as if they had been waiting for her team all along. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she scanned the surrounding terrain, her instincts telling her there was more to this than just a simple raid. She shook off the feeling, pushing it to the side for now, knowing there would be time to reflect later. They reached the LZ in record time, the helicopter already hovering above them, waiting for their signal. The team moved quickly, climbing aboard one by one, their eyes darting around, still alert, despite the mission's success. As the helicopter lifted off, Emily settled into her seat, glancing at the faces of her team. Everyone was exhausted but satisfied. The weight of the mission began to lift, but the nagging feeling stayed with her. She stared out the window, the landscape below blurring as they flew back to base, her mind racing through every detail of the operation. The enemy was better prepared than they had anticipated, and Emily couldn't shake the sense that they had been lured into a trap. They landed back at the base with no incident, the helicopter touching down on the tarmac, and as the doors opened, Emily stepped out, feeling the cold night air hit her face. Her commanding officer, Lieutenant Harris, was waiting for them, his face grim. "Carter, I need you in the command center, now," he said, his voice low and urgent. Emily nodded, already knowing something was wrong. She followed him through the base, her mind still processing the events of the mission. The command center was abuzz with activity as they entered. Several officers hunched over monitors, reviewing intelligence reports. Harris walked over to the main screen, pulling up a satellite image of the hills where they had just been. "Look at this," he said, tapping the screen, and Emily leaned in, her eyes narrowing as she studied the image. The hills were dotted with several enemy positions, but something stood out. There was a large structure just off the grid, hidden behind the trees. It wasn't on any of the previous maps, and it didn't make sense. Emily's heart skipped a beat as she realized what it was. An abandoned facility, one that hadn't been listed in any of the intelligence reports they had received before the mission. "What the hell is that?" Emily asked, pointing at the structure. Harris looked at her, his expression hardening. "That's what we need to figure out. We've just received new intel. This isn't just a standard enemy hideout. That facility is a major target, and it was deliberately kept off the grid. Someone didn't want us to know about it, Carter. Someone on the inside didn't want us to find it." Emily's stomach churned as she processed the new information. She had suspected something was off, but now she had confirmation that this mission was part of something bigger, something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Harris turned to her, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to get eyes on that facility. We'll go in tonight, and this time, we'll make sure we don't miss anything. I'm sending you back in, Carter. You're leading the team this time." Emily felt the weight of the responsibility settle onto her shoulders. She knew this wasn't just about taking out enemy soldiers anymore, this was about uncovering a threat, one that had been hidden in plain sight. She nodded without hesitation, her resolve hardening. Understood, sir. We'll go in and get the answers we need. Harris gave her a sharp nod before turning to brief the rest of the team. Emily stood there for a moment, watching him, her mind already running through the logistics of the next operation. She didn't trust the intel they had been given, and she knew something wasn't right, but she would do what she had always done, push forward, one step at a time, and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The team was already assembling in the hangar, preparing for the next phase, and Emily was ready. This time, they would not be caught off guard. This time, they would uncover the enemy's true plans. As she walked towards the hangar, her mind was set. This was more than a mission, this was about exposing the truth behind the operation, and Emily Carter was going to find out exactly what the enemy was hiding. As Emily and her team boarded the helicopter, the atmosphere was thick with tension. They were headed back into the hills, the site of their earlier mission, but this time it was different. This time, it wasn't just about neutralizing enemy combatants, it was about uncovering something bigger, something that had been kept hidden from them. Emily sat silently, her eyes focused on the horizon as the helicopter lifted off. Her mind already running through the mission details. She knew this would be no ordinary raid. There was something off about the intelligence they had received, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. As the helicopter flew through the night, the sound of the rotor blades cutting through the air was the only noise, drowning out the thoughts of the team. Emily glanced over at her team, each of them preparing mentally for what lay ahead. They were all professionals, well-trained and capable, but even they knew that this mission felt different. The facility they were heading to was not something they had planned for, not something they had been briefed on, and that was enough to make anyone uneasy. The chopper veered to the left, flying low over the rugged terrain. The hills below were dark and still, the thick canopy of trees stretching as far as the eye could see. Emily felt the familiar rush of adrenaline begin to pulse through her veins as they approached the drop zone. She double-checked her gear, making sure everything was in place, her rifle, her sidearm, her night vision goggles, all essential tools for what was about to unfold. As the helicopter descended toward the landing zone, Emily could feel the tension in the air. She didn't look at her team, she didn't need to. She knew they were all thinking the same thing. This wasn't just another mission, this was personal, and they all felt it. The helicopter touched down softly, the rotors kicking up dirt and debris as the doors slid open. Emily was the first to step out, her boots hitting the ground with a muted thud. She motioned for the team to follow, and they quickly moved into position, spreading out across the terrain. The night was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of the helicopter lifting back into the sky. Emily led the way, her senses alert, her eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of movement. They moved quickly and quietly through the dense foliage, making their way toward the facility. As they got closer, the faint outline of the structure became visible in the distance. It was large, hidden away among the trees, and it looked abandoned, but Emily knew better than to trust appearances. She signaled for the team to stop, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the area. There was something off about this place. It was too quiet, too still, and her instincts told her that they weren't the only ones who had been watching this site. The team took cover behind the trees, waiting for her signal to advance. Emily motioned for them to spread out, each of them taking a position to cover all angles. As they moved into position, Emily's thoughts raced. This mission was far from over, and she wasn't convinced they were going to find what they were looking for. Her mind went back to the intel they had received, how it didn't add up, how the facility wasn't on any of the maps. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something far larger than they could imagine. She had been in enough operations to know when something felt off, and this definitely felt off. She adjusted her night vision goggles, scanning the area in front of her. The facility loomed larger now, its cold, metallic exterior gleaming faintly in the moonlight. There were no signs of life, no movement. But Emily wasn't fooled. She knew that silence was often the loudest warning. As the team closed in on the facility, she felt her heart rate increase. This was it, the moment when everything would change. They had to get in, find what they came for, and get out. But it wasn't going to be that simple. There was too much at stake, and Emily knew that the enemy would be ready for them. the mission wasn't just about getting answers anymore, it was about surviving the truth. Emily motioned for the team to stay low as they approached the facility's entrance. Their movements synchronized, practiced, and smooth. They reached the door, but there was no sign of resistance. Emily signaled for the team to hold position while she checked the door. She moved to the side, listening carefully for any sounds. The silence was overwhelming. She slowly tested the door handle, finding it unlocked. She motioned for the team to move in, and they did so without hesitation. The moment they crossed the threshold, the atmosphere changed. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of old machinery and dust. The facility was abandoned, but the signs of recent activity were clear. The floors were littered with old papers, empty crates, and remnants of equipment. Emily's gaze swept across the room, searching for anything that would explain the mystery of this place. She wasn't sure what they were looking for, but she knew that whatever it was, they were about to find it. As the team moved deeper into the facility, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that someone, was waiting for them. And then, they found it. A large computer system in the back of the room, its screens flashing with data. This was it. This was what they had been sent to uncover. As Emily and her team moved deeper into the facility, the low hum of machinery and the eerie silence weighed heavily on them. The flickering lights above cast long, jagged shadows across the room as they approached the computer system. Emily held up her hand, signaling the team to stop. Her eyes remained fixed on the screens flashing in front of her, the data scrolling rapidly across the monitor. Her heart rate quickened as she stepped closer, scanning the information that seemed to be coded, fragmented. But there was one thing that stood out: coordinates, a set of numbers that didn't match anything in their intel reports. Her mind raced as she connected the dots, realizing that these were not just random data, these were instructions, coordinates to another location, another hidden facility. She turned to her team, her voice steady but urgent. "We found something. This isn't just a safe house, this is a command center. We need to get this information back to base immediately." The team moved quickly, surrounding the computer to download the data and secure the room. Emily's instincts kicked in as she continued to scan the area, her eyes darting to every corner of the dark facility. She felt the growing unease in her gut, the familiar sensation that something was about to go wrong. The room seemed too quiet now, as though the walls were closing in, and just as her team finished securing the data, the unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed from down the hall. Emily froze, her body tense, the hairs on the back of her neck standing up. Someone else was here, and they were not alone. "We've got company," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with command. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed her rifle and motioned for the team to follow her. They moved into position, spreading out along the walls, each of them taking cover in the shadows. Emily's mind was already calculating their options, trying to figure out how to handle the incoming threat. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then, just as she suspected, the lights overhead flickered once more, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath a black tactical helmet. His movements were deliberate, cautious, and Emily knew immediately that this wasn't just a guard, it was someone trained, someone who knew exactly how to deal with threats like them. The team held their breath, waiting for Emily to make her move. But she didn't hesitate. Without warning, she signaled for the team to advance, and in a flash, they moved, their coordinated movements precise and deadly. The man in the doorway didn't have time to react before Emily was upon him, her rifle aimed and her body reacting without a thought. A single shot rang out, echoing in the silence as the man crumpled to the floor, a look of surprise frozen on his face. Emily quickly checked the room, ensuring there were no more threats. She motioned for the team to move forward, and they did, their movements fluid and practiced. But as they continued through the facility, the weight of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a simple raid or a straightforward mission. Someone had been watching them, someone knew they were here, and that realization sent a cold shiver down Emily's spine. They reached the back of the facility, the storage area, and Emily's heart skipped a beat as she saw the massive metal door, secured with high-tech locks. This was it, whatever they were supposed to find. It was behind that door. "Get this open," Emily ordered, her voice low but firm. One of the team members moved quickly to hack into the system, his fingers flying over the controls as he worked to override the security protocols. As the lock disengaged with a sharp click, the door slowly creaked open, revealing a large, dimly lit room. The air inside was thick with the smell of metal and machinery, and at the far end of the room, Emily saw what she was hoping to find, a row of servers, their lights blinking ominously in the dark. They were the heart of the operation, the source of all the data they had been tracking, and they needed to be destroyed before they could be used against them. Emily stepped inside the room, motioning for the team to fan out and cover all angles. As they secured the area, Emily approached the servers. Her fingers already reaching for the demolition charges strapped to her vest, she placed them carefully around the base of the server units, her movements precise and practiced. As she prepared to set the timer, a voice echoed from the shadows, "You shouldn't have come here." Emily spun around, her rifle raised, ready to fire, but she froze when she saw the man standing in front of her. He was tall, with a scar running down his face, and his eyes were cold, calculating. This was no ordinary enemy, this was someone who knew the game, someone who had been pulling the strings all along. "Who are you?" Emily demanded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline rushing through her veins. The man smiled, a slow, knowing grin that sent a chill through her. "I think you know exactly who I am," he replied, his voice smooth and unsettling. "But you're too late. This facility was never about information, it was about baiting you here, making you think you were in control." Emily's mind raced as she processed his words. Everything she had thought she knew about the mission was unraveling before her eyes. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. As Emily stood facing the man, her mind raced. The realization of what he had just said hit her hard. This whole mission had been a setup. They had been bait all along, and the true enemy was playing a much bigger game than they had anticipated. The man's cold smile only deepened her unease. She gripped her rifle tighter, her senses alert, every muscle in her body primed for action. "What's your game?" she asked, her voice unwavering despite the flood of questions in her mind. The man's eyes glinted as he took a step closer, his posture relaxed as though he knew he had the upper hand. "It's simple," he said, his voice smooth. "You were never meant to find this facility, you were meant to find the wrong one, the one we let you find, this place. It's nothing more than a decoy." Emily's heart sank as the words settled in. Everything they had been led to believe, all the intelligence they had worked with, had been false. This wasn't just about capturing or neutralizing enemies, it was about creating a diversion, making them chase ghosts while something far more dangerous was brewing in the background. The man laughed softly, as though reading her mind. "You're catching on. The real operation is already in motion. Your team has already been compromised, you're just too late." Emily felt the blood rush to her ears as the weight of his words hit her. They had walked into a trap, but worse than that, her team, her people, were already at risk. She glanced at her team, but they were just as shocked, still securing the area but now beginning to realize the gravity of the situation. Emily knew that every second they spent here was another second the enemy had to advance their plan. Without taking her eyes off the man, she issued a command to her team, "Get the data out now. We need to move, fast." They didn't question her, each of them moved with purpose, starting to extract what they could from the server as Emily kept her rifle trained on the man. She knew the situation had just escalated, but she wasn't about to let him get the upper hand. The man took another step forward, his smile widening. "You're still trying to save your people, aren't you? It's already too late, they've already been activated, and there's nothing you can do to stop it now." Emily's blood ran cold as the weight of his words hit her. He wasn't just toying with her, he was playing a deadly game, one that had already begun. "What's activated?" she demanded, her voice steady but sharp. "What have you done?" The man's eyes sparkled with amusement as he shrugged slightly. "I'm afraid you're going to have to find out for yourself." He turned to leave, but as he moved toward the door, Emily's instincts kicked in. Without a second thought, she aimed her rifle at him, her voice calm but filled with authority. "Stop right there." He froze, his back still to her, but then slowly turned around, raising his hands in mock surrender. "You don't get it, do you? This is bigger than you, it's bigger than any of you." His voice lowered as he took another step. "You'll never be able to catch up, everything's already in motion, you're just too slow." Emily's mind raced as she calculated her next move. He was right, they were behind, but that didn't mean it was over. The mission was still salvageable, and she wasn't about to let him walk away with the advantage. "You're wrong," she said, her voice unwavering. "This ends now." With a swift motion, Emily moved to close the distance, her team now behind her, fully aware of the danger they were in. She moved in carefully, but the man made no move to resist. He wasn't afraid. No, this wasn't about fear. He was confident that the trap had already been set, and that the pieces were already falling into place. As Emily reached for the man, a soft beep echoed through the room, an alarm, faint but distinct. It was a signal, a countdown. She realized then that the situation had just gone from bad to worse. "You should have left when you had the chance," the man said with a dark smile as he pressed a button on his wrist. A series of loud beeps followed, and the entire facility began to shake, the lights flickering violently as the walls groaned under the pressure. "What did you do?" Emily shouted, her voice now tinged with panic, but the man just laughed. "I activated the fail-safes. It's over, Carter. You're too late." The ground beneath them shook violently, and a loud explosion rang out in the distance, followed by another, and another. Emily's eyes widened as the realization hit her. This entire facility was rigged to blow, and they were caught in the middle of it. She turned to her team. "Move, now," she barked, her voice full of urgency. They rushed toward the exit, but the building was already coming down around them. The walls cracked, and the ceiling above them began to crumble. They had seconds, maybe less, to get out of there before everything collapsed. Emily pushed forward, her team following in a tight formation, but the explosion behind them was already too close. Fire and debris exploded outward, the force sending Emily crashing into the wall. Her vision blurred as she fought to stay conscious, but the sound of her team shouting her name was enough to bring her back. "Carter, get up." Harris's voice pierced through the haze as he pulled her up, and they kept moving. They weren't out of the woods yet. They still had to make it out alive, and the clock was ticking. They had no idea where the exit was, but Emily was determined. Failure was not an option, not now. The facility was collapsing around them, walls crumbling, and the deafening sound of explosions filled the air. Emily and her team pushed forward, their footsteps pounding against the debris-covered floor, but the heat was unbearable, and the smoke made it difficult to see. The sound of fire crackling in the distance only added to the chaos as they tried to navigate their way through the increasingly unstable building. "This way!" Emily shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. She could hear her team behind her, their breathing heavy, but they were keeping up. They had to get out, there was no time to waste. As they turned another corner, the exit came into view, but the pathway was blocked by a falling beam. Emily's heart raced as she signaled for the team to stop. They had to move fast, but now they had another obstacle to overcome. She looked back at Harris and nodded. "We have to get through, go." Harris moved forward, his strength evident as he grabbed the beam and pushed it aside, but the sound of another explosion rocked the facility, shaking the very foundation beneath them. "Hurry!" Emily shouted, as the building seemed to groan under the pressure. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. With the beam cleared, they rushed forward, but another explosion hit closer this time, throwing them off balance. Emily stumbled but quickly regained her footing, her eyes scanning the exit. They were so close, but the danger wasn't over yet. Just as they reached the door, a loud crash from above caught their attention. Debris rained down in front of them, blocking their path. "This is it, Carter," Harris called out, his voice filled with urgency, but there was no time to turn back. Emily's mind raced as she took in the situation. They were trapped, but not for long. She knew what had to be done. "Move," she shouted, diving forward with Harris close behind. The others followed, and just as another explosion rocked the building, they made it through the door. But as they stepped into the open air, Emily's breath caught in her chest. The entire facility was in flames now, the smoke billowing up into the sky. It was over, the mission was complete, but the cost was high. Emily looked around at her team, relief flooding her as she realized they had made it out alive. They weren't unscathed, but they were alive. That was all that mattered now. "Good work, everyone," Emily said, her voice steady, but inside, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real mission had only just begun. The intel they had gathered had been critical, but now there were more questions than answers. She had a sinking feeling that the enemy's true plans were just starting to unfold, and this wasn't over. Emily turned to Harris, who was staring at the burning facility in the distance. "What's next?" she asked, knowing the answer before he even spoke. "We get back to base, we analyze the data, and we prepare for what's coming next. This was just the beginning." Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. She knew he was right, the mission may have ended, but the war was far from over. They had survived this battle, but now they had to figure out the bigger picture. Emily had been in enough situations to know that this wasn't the end. It was just a new chapter in a fight that would test them all. She took one last look at the burning facility, a reminder of the danger they had just escaped, and then turned to lead her team back to base. There was work to do, and Emily Carter would not stop until she uncovered the truth. As Emily and her team returned to base, the weight of the mission lingered in the air. They had survived, but the events of the last few hours had left their mark. The helicopter flew in silence, each of them lost in their own thoughts, but Emily's mind was focused. The burning facility in the distance was a constant reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. They had made it out, but they had no answers yet. As they landed at base, Emily was the first to disembark, her boots hitting the tarmac with a heavy thud. She scanned the area, her body still on high alert, but the base was calm, too calm. The events of the past few days had been like a whirlwind, and she knew they had only scratched the surface of what was really going on. "Carter," Lieutenant Harris called out, his voice urgent but steady as he approached, "get inside, we've got to go over the intel." Emily nodded without a word, already making her way toward the command center. She had seen enough of the world's darker sides to know that this wasn't just about a mission anymore, this was about something bigger, and they were right in the middle of it. Inside the command center, the atmosphere was tense. Several officers and analysts were gathered around large monitors, their faces drawn with concern as they reviewed the data they had recovered. Emily walked over to the lead analyst, a man named Jameson, who was staring intently at a screen filled with maps, coordinates, and encrypted messages. "What do we have?" she asked, her voice sharp. Jameson looked up at her, his expression grim. "It's worse than we thought, Carter. Those coordinates you brought back, they're linked to multiple underground facilities, hidden in plain sight, all over the globe, and these aren't just safe houses or enemy hideouts. These are full-scale operations, weapon manufacturing, research facilities. And something far more disturbing, bioengineering." Emily's stomach turned as she processed the information. Bioengineering? It sounded like something out of a nightmare, but she knew Jameson wasn't exaggerating. He was too calm, too precise. "Are we talking about weapons?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jameson nodded, his fingers moving quickly over the keyboard as he brought up more data. "Yes, but not just weapons in a conventional sense. These facilities are working on something far more dangerous. Biological warfare. Genetically engineered soldiers, chemical agents. It's an entire network, hidden in plain sight, and it's being run by people with no regard for the rules of war or human life." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just about taking out a few enemy soldiers anymore, this was about stopping a global threat, one that could alter the balance of power and humanity forever. She turned to Harris, who had been listening silently from behind her, his expression darkening as he took in the news. "What do we do now?" she asked, her eyes narrowing with resolve. Harris stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "We stop it, Carter. We take down every single facility we can find, we expose them for what they are, and we make sure the world knows what's really happening. But we do it carefully. We can't afford to rush into this without knowing exactly what we're dealing with." Emily nodded, her mind already racing with the implications of Harris's words. This was bigger than any mission she had ever been on, and she knew that they were about to enter the most dangerous phase of their operation. "Get ready," she said, her voice firm. "We're going to need everything we've got to stop this." The team gathered around, each of them aware of the stakes. They were no longer just soldiers, they were part of something much bigger, something that would determine the future of the world. As the briefing continued, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that the real fight was just beginning. The enemy they had just uncovered was unlike anything they had faced before, and the battle ahead would test every limit of their training and resolve. But Emily Carter was ready. She had seen the darkest parts of humanity, and she knew how to fight back. This mission, this war, it wasn't over. It was just the start of a new chapter, and Emily wasn't going to stop until she had exposed the truth and brought this shadowy network to its knees. As the team prepared for the next phase of their operation, Emily looked out the window at the distant horizon, her thoughts focused, her heart steeled for what was to come. The fight for the future had just begun.